Let me ask you about the Swiss franc. Do you have any views on that as a safe haven currency?
Well,
I mean, they tried buying
yeah.
a lot of euros, and the Swiss National Bank took huge losses as a consequence of that on their foreign exchange trading. But how do you see the Swiss franc, going forward from here?
Well, I think it's since 1972, the dollar is down about 80% against the Swiss franc, if I remember correctly.
That's probably pretty accurate.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is then you compare all the currencies to gold. Swiss franc is also down dramatically against gold.
Yes.
So as we know, all currencies are going down against real money, just at slightly different rates. So the Swiss franc has always been, as we know, a currency that people go to when there's concern in the world about the financial system. Now, the high Swiss franc is a real problem for Switzerland from the point of view of terms of trade. It's too expensive for them. As you know, they always protected or defended the Swiss franc against the euro until they lost billions and gave up that game. And now the Swiss franc is too expensive for the Swiss. And I'm concerned about Switzerland also from the point of view that they are a very strong and stable economy, but they cannot withstand the pressures from the rest of the world. So I think that the Swiss franc will continue to strengthen against the dollar. There's no question about it. I had a target years ago of 50. We're now 87 today, dollar against the Swiss franc. And my target was 50, so we still have a long way to go. But I'd much rather own gold than the Swiss franc, because I think gold will go up against all currencies, including the Swiss franc.
Yeah, in a world where the printing presses are going wild at central banks, the Swiss National Bank can't on its own really stop it. They can't buy all of these extra currencies that are being created without incurring huge losses like they did on their foreign exchange trading with the euro.
No.
It's one force is not enough to stop all of the bad money processes going on around the world. But what would you suggest is the thinking within the Swiss National Bank itself? I mean, back in the 1970s, it was quite clear that the Swiss National Bank was committed to sound money, and there was even a period of time when they went to negative interest rates to discourage people from hot money from coming into Switzerland. But back then, of course, its partner was the Bundesbank in maintaining the Deutschmark as sound money as well. But now the Swiss National Bank is pretty much on its own, because the European Central Bank doesn't really seem too committed to sound money, given the fact that they've been buying so much sovereign debt. So do you see the Swiss National Bank more or less throwing in the towel and giving up to maintain any kind of pretense for sound money?
I think they have gradually over the years, they sold off some of their gold, as you know, and then the Swiss banks used to be the most conservative banks in the world from the point of view of investments. Now they are like any international bank. They have enormous positions, and relative to the size of the country, of course, one has to be concerned about the Swiss banking system.
You mean the big banks, the
big
UBS,
UBS,
Credit Suisse,
yeah.
Not the smaller cantonal banks or the private banks?
No, I'm talking about the big banks. Of course, they have enormous exposure, if we get a problem in the banking system, which I think we will get worldwide, the Swiss bank, the Swiss government is too small in relation to the big banks' exposure. So that to me is a real concern. If something happens to the financial system, if we have a systemic problem, it doesn't matter if you have the most conservative Swiss bank or if you have one with bigger exposure, because even the smallest banks, if they get dollar deposits, what do they do with the dollar deposits? They put it in New York. If they have a foreign exchange position with the dollar as counterparty, they have that with the US bank. So sadly, in my view, if we do get a systemic problem in the world, no bank can withstand that pressure.